Welcome back. In this video, I want to talk about an important concept in Express, and that is middleware. Let me show you how it works. If I run the server here, I just have a simple server that sends test. Express has a concept of middleware. And if I do app.use, this is a generic Express middleware that I can enter in here. And what middleware does is, as the name suggests, as the request is coming in, it's going to pass through this use function and then trickle down to whatever we get, post, put, delete. And this middleware is going to do something to the request that we just had in order to perhaps make it easier to work with down here. Let's demonstrate that example. App.use receives request, response, and then something called next. And within this function, we will just say console.log h1 hello. If we save and go back here and run localhost, it's hanging here. Even if I open up the console, nothing's happening. If I go back, I see that hello gets triggered because I'm console logging it, but it never reaches here. Well, that is because in order for the middleware to keep passing data through, it needs to call next, the third parameter. So now by calling next, if I refresh, I receive test. So the middleware, the way it works is we use app.use. It gets a request of the website. The request comes through. We can do whatever we want with it. In our case, we're not really touching it. We're just console logging hello. And then we hit next, and then Express keeps running through these. And although you might be thinking, why is this useful? There are many, many cases that I'll show you later on why middleware is important. And middlewares are great scripts that people have pre-written that you can add to your server. But you'll see that more in the next video. I just wanted to show you the basic concept of middleware. Something that receives ahead of time, before it gets to the routes, the request, modifies it, and then passes the next function to keep it going. I'll see you in the next one. Bye. Welcome back. Let's try and get this post request to work that we couldn't get in the previous video. Now, in order for us to test something more than just get, well, we can use the terminal, but there's a really nice tool that allows us to make these requests to a server and see what we get back. And it's called Postman. If you go to www.getpostman.com, it is one of the best tools if you're ever working with a server. It's free, and you can download it for your operating system. Just simply click on whichever one you want, sign up, and once it's loaded, then you can open it up, and you'll have something like this. And don't worry, it's very, very simple to use. We simply have here the requests that we want to get, and you'll see a few that you've never seen before, and don't worry about them. These are very, very rarely used. We see the ones that we care about, delete, put, post, get, right there. And you simply enter the URL that you want to have this running on. So in our example, let's do npm start again. And while the server is running, let's just go to profile, profile. And then in here, we want to say local host 3000, that's the port that we gave it, and we'll say profile. So we want to do a get request over here. If I click send, I get getting profile. It gives me the headers and the body, which is great. But now because we have this tool, we can also do a post request. So let's say that we are no longer sending the user. We want to send a response And from this response, we want to return whatever user that we submit to profile. So let's start off here first. We're going to change this to a post. And with a post, remember that we can actually add things to the body. And you see over here that there's a couple of options. Form data, the XWWW form on URL encoded, we have raw, and then binary. Now, don't let this scare you. These two are forms through HTML. If you usually do an HTML form tag and do a get or a post request, you can just click on this and you can see here a key value. So I can say name equals Andre. And now when I send this, I get Sally and soccer. Well, because I haven't saved this yet. Let's go back to what we had before and send that again. We see that the post request is working. And if I want to access this information, I simply do request.body. But let's see if this works. If I click send, I get undefined. And that is because Express only gives you a little bit. You still need a few packages if you want this to work. If you ever want to access request.body, well, you need to use a middleware. And the middleware that we want is called body parser. And you'll use it in most Express servers, so you'll just get used to it. It's npm install body parser. And now this body parser, what it's going to do is it's going to grab whatever information we receive and parse it, just like JSON or forms, into something that we can use. In order to actually use it, well, we know how a middleware works. We simply at the top say app.use. And body parser will come with a body parser that will just require with the package that we just installed. In app.use, we simply do body parser.url encoded, which is how we're able to get this. And we just have to pass it a parameter extended to false. Let's try that again. I'm going to save. I'm going to npm start. If we go back and send again, we see that, there you go, it's working. Name is Andre because we've sent our key value with form data. So if you're building a server for a form that gets submitted, you'll use this. But as you know, there's also JSON that we can use. And the way we use JSON is we click on raw, and in here, we can send whichever things we want. In our case, it's going to be JSON. And with JSON, we can now say what we want to send. And if we ever do any wrong syntax, it'll tell us that this is wrong JSON. Well, let's just say for the profile, I want to add a new user. And this user will be called, remember double quotes here. We'll have user, and this user will be called Jenny. And Jenny will have a hobby of tennis. Everything looks fine. That's JSON. If I now send this, I get an empty object. Again, because we've only told it to parse URL encoded, body parser needs to also know about JSON. Again, in order to do that, we say app.use body parser.json. If we save that and send again, look at that. We have user, Jenny, hobby, tennis. So now we can add that user by maybe adding it to our database and then sending a response, success. Let's try that again. We get a response, success, that we've posted Jenny, tennis. In this way, we can also do put, which is very similar. We just send the data, but put is used for updating if we want to update perhaps Jenny to have a different hobby, and delete to delete maybe the user. Something that we'll get into the next video. But as you can see, Postman is great. It's a great way to test out your server before you connect it to your front end. Something that we'll definitely do in this course in our final project. Very cool. I'll see you in the next one. we have our beautiful website set up. It's time to create Welcome back. We have our beautiful website set up. It's time to create some functionality where we enter a URL, press detect, and an image appears with
in time. And although the velocity's magnitude is constant here, its direction is changing. It keeps being, if there was no acceleration on it, its magnitude and the direction of its velocity would be constant. And the car would just keep going in that direction. So somehow the car's direction is changing inward over and over and over again. And so this is just kind of a little bit of a trick question, something for you to think about. We're gonna discuss the math in more detail in future videos. But what's happening here is the cars actually are accelerating, and they're actually accelerating inwards, and that's what's changing inwards. When I say inwards, they're being accelerated towards the center of the curve. They're being accelerated to the center of the curve, and that's what's allowing their direction to actually change. All of these in there. So then let me get this green one. That looks like that. So let me copy and let me paste it. Put it like that. And then let me do, and I could keep going. I could keep drawing velocity vectors around this circle, but let me do this orange one right over here. So copy and then paste. So do just like that. So between this purple time and this, let me do it in white. Between this purple time right over here and this, and I guess this magenta time and this purple time, what was the change in velocity? Well, we can look at that purely from these vectors right here. The change in velocity between those two times was that right over there. That is our change in velocity. So if we were to take this vector, this little white vector that I did, and say, okay, in what direction was the velocity changing when the object was going on this part of the arc? Well, it was roughly, if I were to just translate that vector right over here, it's roughly going in that direction.
On the box method, I've tried to include every kind of possible question they can ask. So if you know how to do all of these, it should cover you for any question they ask. So the word we have is nuclear, and it's asking a couple of different things about how many ways it can be arranged. So the first one, it says how many ways it can be arranged if there are no restrictions. Then it says if it has to end with a certain letter, in this case the letter L. If it has to begin with a certain set of letters, this time vowel. If all three vowels have to be together. If the N and C have to be together, and if the N and the C have to be apart. So 6 different questions we have to ask. All of them going to require slightly different thinking, but they're all going to use the box method. So I will go down, make some space, and we'll start. So I'll go question 1 over here on the right. If there are no restrictions, we have 7 different letters in nuclear, then the answer is just 7 factorial. Because there are no restrictions, we're just arranging letters in a sequence. 7 factorial is going to be 5040. So that's the answer for this one, handy enough. Okay, if it has to end with L, I'll go down here to make space. So just to end with L, change to yellow. We're going to have to use the box method. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So 7 boxes, and they're all going to be multiplied by each other. So we start with the kind of restriction rule first, and then we're going to go from left to right. So we start with saying it has to end with L. So there's only one L in nuclear, so that means this last one, the amount of options we have for this box is 1. It has to be an L. So then after this, when one letter is gone, say this letter is gone, the L, and we have to fill in the rest of it from left to right. So there are no more restrictions, so the rest of it we can just fill in as normal. So there's 6 letters left, so we go 6 here, and then we go 5 here, 4, 3, 2, and 1. So each case, as we fill in each kind of space, there's less and less options left. So in this question, the answer is going to be 6 by 5 by 4.
Phone on the second, fourth, and 6th days, but not on the other days. The answer is 0.0032768. Part B. Find the probability that she will answer the phone for the 4th time on the 7th day. This means that she will answer 3 times from the first 6 days, and she will also answer on the 7th day. Now, answering 3 times from the first 6 days, this is an example of a Bernoulli trial. The Bernoulli trial formula tells us the probability of R successes from n trials is equal to n choose R times the probability of a success to the power of the number of successes times the probability of a failure to the power of the number of failures. So here we're looking for the probability of 3 out of 6 successes. We had 6 trials, so 6 choose 3 times the probability of a success. The probability of a success in this instance is an answer, and that's equal to 1 over 5. So we have 1 over 5. Now we want to answer 3 out of 6 times. In other words, we want 3 successes, 3 answers by the probability of a failure. Now failure in this instance is not to answer, so this is 4 over 5, and again this occurs on 3 occasions. We can then type all of this into our calculator. This equals 0.08192. Next of all, we want to focus on the probability that she will answer on the 7th day. Now we're told the probability that Kira answers the phone is 1 over 5, therefore it's the same on the 7th day. The probability she answers is 1 over 5. Now to get our overall answer, these two events occur together, so we can multiply them by one another. And if we type all of this into our calculator, we get an answer of 0.016384. So we were asking the question, find the probability she will answer the phone for the 4th time on the 7th day, and the answer is equal to 0.016384. Part C. Connor rings her house once every day for n days. Write in terms of n the probability that Kira will answer the phone at least once. Now the probability that she answers at least once over n days is equal to 1 minus the probability that she doesn't answer over the n days. So this equals 1 minus, now we worked out earlier that the probability she doesn't answer on a given day equals 4 over 5. So this means that the probability that she doesn't answer over n days in a row equals 4 over 5 to the power of n. So
methods that we learned. Welcome back. In this video, we're going to talk about RESTful APIs. Now, what is that? A REST API defines a set of functions which developers can perform requests and receive responses via HTTP protocol, such as get, post, put, delete. Something we've talked about. Remember how I said a web browser sends a request and just hopes that the server returns what the browser asked for. Google servers can send us whatever it wants. It doesn't have to follow the rules that perhaps the web browser sets. With RESTful API, we're able to create an API that is RESTful, something that follows the rules that everybody can agree on so that we have compatibility between different systems. So a RESTful API is an architectural style, and it's an approach to communications. It's an agreed upon set of rules so everyone plays nicely. A RESTful API uses get to receive a resource, put to change the state or update a resource, a post that creates a resource, and a delete to remove it. And that's something that we've already talked about. And the RESTful API is a way to define our server so that it specifies what it can provide and how to use it. In other words, the URL parameters should make sense. For example, if we're doing /profile, well, we expect that if it's a GET request, we're going to get a profile. If it's a POST request, we're going to add a profile. If it's a PUT, perhaps we're updating the profile, and this URL makes sense. And you can think of this as the noun of what we want to receive. The HTTP request is the verb, and everything after the slash is the noun. Welcome back. Now, just to recap, there are 3 places where work needs to happen when displaying websites. The first, well, we obviously make a GET request to superfresh.com. So there's some work that goes there to transfer that request to the backend or the server. And then the server does a bit of work there and maybe returns the HTML file, finds it and returns it, or maybe needs to talk to a database and retrieve some data there. We then have to send that information again through the wires, and then finally, in our browser, do some work so that we can display the page to the user. And looking at this now, we see that there are 3 foolproof ways to increase the speed of your website and applications, and thereby improve customer satisfaction, retention, and conversion. You know, things that make your boss, employer, business really, really happy. So the first thing is you can improve what happens on the client side, the front end, because the front end device needs time to render the page on the screen. The second thing we can improve, well, we can improve the transfer of our files over the wire. Network latency, which is every request needs time to travel from client to the server and back. That's what network latency is, the time it takes to do that transfer. And this becomes even more essential when we consider that an average website makes more than 100 requests to load completely. Yes, that number sounds ridiculous, but it's true. Finally, the third is we can improve the processing done on the backend, or backend processing. The web server needs
reflective sphere. So let's go ahead and get started. So right here you can see I have a circle and 2 rectangles drawn. We're going to use these to practice drawing our hair texture. So first we're going to start with our rectangle. So we're going to start with this one right here. When you're drawing hair, you basically want just really quick lines that start out fat and dark and then get thinner. So if we push a little hard with our pencil.
Welcome to the lesson on drawing thinly and lightly. Now, usually when we draw, sometimes we can be pretty heavy-handed, right? We may use very thick lines, we may press, really hard on the page and get very dark lines in what we're doing. And this lesson is really about encouraging you to lean towards drawing thinner, lighter lines in general, right? In general, drawing thinner and lighter. So for example, I'm going to press really lightly here. I'm going to draw a head using thin lines and as light lines as possible. And what this does is it gives me the freedom to make corrections, first of all, by pressing harder where I need to. So let's say I miss a line the ear, no problem, I'll draw another ear and press harder. And because of the increased contrast in the darkness, in a sense, my brain no longer acknowledges the lighter lines, and it's as if they don't really even exist anymore. And so drawing thinly in that sense helps me to make corrections and not have to erase as much when I'm busy trying to work out a sketch, right? Work out the rough of the sketch. Secondly, as well, drawing thinly helps me control the line weights more. It's very hard to make a thick line that you've drawn thin. So if I drew this line over here for the chin, for that jaw really thick, and then I decided that I actually wanted it a little bit thinner because I wanted to enhance the line weights, it's quite a lot of trouble to kind of grab the eraser, make sure that I'm on the right type of brush, and then kind of trying to come in here and thin the line, and then I'm kind of ruining my line flow and the nice looseness that I had in the stroke, and it's not something you want to have to struggle with. Versus, drawing it thinly in the beginning allows me to, let's just erase this whole line, allows me to control the line weights much better. So let's draw this in again. I'm going to use a nice thin light line. And now I want to control the weighting, and I want to say, okay, find here by the neck where it overlaps, I want this to be a thicker, darker line, and let that kind of taper off on both sides. And then perhaps here, where the jaw kind of comes and curves around over the neck, I want that to be thicker. And you can have a lot more control over your lines when you're leaning more towards drawing thinly and drawing lightly, so that you can easily modify your construction, and so that you can...
I might want to go too fast, I don't want to go too slow either, because then people are more fast drawers, and so try to make an equal balance to try to keep everyone happy. Anyway, so go ahead and draw this from, obviously you already drew it along with me, so you have one drawing of this already. Now I want you to go ahead and draw a few more times for reference, whether it be a medical book or wherever you find the image, or if you want to just use, what we have here. It might be better to kind of use a reference, like a medical reference of some sort, not a drawing. If you can, like either a really good three-dimensional representation of it, or a photograph of the actual scapula, or a video pausing of the actual scapula. The reason why is because you're just going to see more details of it that way. Anyway, so I don't want to talk too long here. So go ahead and draw like at least 5 times from reference. After you've done that, like I said, you should know the drill by now. Then you draw from memory to the best you can. Go back and forth, until you feel comfortable drawing from your memory, and you feel like you kind of mastered the shape. Now, wait a few days, maybe even wait a week. Keep practicing drawing it. Don't just, if you feel like, oh, I mastered it, woohoo, I just drew it from my mind, and I mastered the shape, I'm good to go. Don't think it's going to stay in your mind. See, what still has to happen, that's your short-term memory. Your brain still has to transfer that information into your long-term memory. So you want to do is wait, keep practicing it, don't stop, draw these shapes you master for the next few days. So however many shapes you decide to take on, just keep in mind, you have to keep drawing that amount of shapes for the next few days in order for it to transfer to long-term memory. Then go ahead and wait a week, and then see if you can still draw it from your memory. Then you know it's transferred to your long-term memory. Then to make sure it stays there, you have to practice, every now and again, and draw from your memory all these shapes. Okay. So now we have all this so far down. So we got our basic skull shape. We haven't actually gone into the skull shape yet. We will, but we just haven't done that yet. What I can do actually very quickly is, let's go ahead and just kind of get into some basic skull shape here. So it's kind of shaped like this. You don't have to memorize this yet. I just want to kind of show you how it's going to look. Because when we get into the skull, then you'll have exercises and things. If you want to go and draw with me, you can. Some people's skulls kind of get wider. So if you wanted to draw the skull a little bit wider, you can. Every skull is a little different. So I'll make it a little bit wider like that. What I'm trying to do is not lift I'm going to talk about it as if I'm keeping my pencil on the canvas. Really, I'm keeping it on the Cintiq. But what I do is I try not to lift it. I try to keep it on the Cintiq. And what that does for me, and I think it will for you too, is help you draw smoother lines. It's a really neat technique where you try to draw without ever lifting your pencil. So you need to move from one place to the other. You just lightly go from one place to the other. There's this kind of, this is where your skull grows. And I think they're important marks to map those little lines right there. Your ears are going to fit in, just so you know, even though we haven't gotten to the tissues yet, your ears are going to fit in right about there. Next, you're going to see part of the front of the jaw, which is why I have that basic shape there. I'm just going to keep it as a basic shape. Then you have your vertebrae. We're not going to get into drawing individual vertebrae. There's really no point. Maybe I'll draw like,
The third most persuasive word is because. Because speaks to reasoning. It shows cause and effect. And the way that you can use this is to speak to results. It's to help your prospect rationalize the offer. Let me show you what I mean. Your prospect will always say the following sentence internally. I need this because blank. It's your job to help them fill in the blank. I need this because it will help me lose weight. I need this because I want to be impressive in front of my friends. I need this because it will make me money. When you say because, you're showing cause and effect. So in my context, I have online course students, and I usually try to let them know about upcoming courses that I'm going to release or any information that's insider. I want them to know about it. And I want them to know the reason why I'm letting them know about it is because I value them. So here's a line out of a recent email I wrote to some of my students. I said, you're one of the first to hear about this offer because I value my students. I want them to know the reason why they're getting this isn't just because I wanted to send it to them randomly, but I'm sending it to them and giving them an offer because I value them. Here's a second example of writing some cause and effect copy. It says here, this person increased their revenue by 20% because they took my course. It's a simple cause and effect word that helps you bridge the gap between what you're reading.
And then if you're doing this on Google Docs, you're going to notice here that on the left, you have this document outline. And this is looking pretty good. It looks like nothing tripped up Google this time, but sometimes you'll notice that when you are working on your resume, it'll put in like extra sections. So if you ever need to take out a section, you can go ahead and remove it from the outline because you want it to look like this, almost like a table of contents for your professional profile. That's one of the big benefits of using Google Docs is that it's easy to navigate on desktop. For example, oh, look, okay, I'm going to go to their functional expertise. It'll take you right to the section, or their education is going to take you right to the section. All right, my friend, this is going to be the most fun that you've had with this resume process during this, I bet. And so that is that we're going to be basically putting you right on the cutting edge. You know, the labor market is becoming so digital, so technology-based. Even if you're in a traditional role, even if you're doing something that's not at the computer all the time, the fact that you can show yourself to be confident with technology, or competent with technology rather, is such a value add for employers. So in this step, we're going to be first, let's just make sure we share this document if you're doing this on Google Docs. So if you're on Microsoft Word, then you're not going to be able to do this unless maybe if you have some of the live features, you can do it. But you're